Welcome to Just a Farm Wife with your host, Tara Emerson. Tara is a farm wife, photographer, mom, podcaster, author, public speaker, and much more. On this podcast, Tara takes listeners on a journey through all aspects of life and how we can create future growth. This podcast helps to empower women to believe they are more than the labeling that society hands them. And remember, you are never just in anything.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Just a Farm Wife. I'm your host, Tara Emerson, and today we are talking with Dr. Kristen Strom. Dr. Kristen Strom wears many hats. She's a farm wife, mom, speaker, author, and transformational life coach. But at the heart of it all, she's passionate about helping women in agriculture live with more purpose, clarity, and peace. As the wife of a third-generation farmer in West Central Illinois, Kristen knows firsthand what it's like to juggle marriage, family, career, farming, and deep community commitments, often while putting yourself last. A former professor turned entrepreneur, Kristen understands the pressure to do it all and the burnout that can follow. Through her own journey, she learned that prioritizing wellness isn't selfish, it's essential. Today, through her Empowered Ascent coaching program, live and virtual masterclasses, speaking engagements across the country, she helps women refocus on the three key areas of wellness so that they can lead, work, and live from a place of confidence, peace, and purpose. With warmth and authenticity, Kristen blends her own life experiences with research-based strategies to help listeners reconnect with their gifts, find balance in demanding seasons, and take small steps forward to a life that feels intentional, sustainable, and fully alive. Thank you for being with us. Can I call you Kristen, or is it always
Absolutely. No, Kristen is perfectly fine. Perfectly fine.
Thank you for being on. This show is kind of my baby, and we're getting back to trying things out and exploring wonderful women and their stories, reminding everyone that you're never just in anything.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on here. I know when I first met you about a year ago, I just loved that message because it was something I had lived so deeply. And I'm just honored that you reached out to have me on your podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. Kristen and I met about a year ago at a farming conference, and she was there with her husband. And at that time, you kind of led a women's group conversation circle, right?
Yeah, like at a breakfast. Yep.
Yeah. And sharing your story of how you got from point A to point B,
Yep.
right? And we talked a little bit about strategies and that sort of thing. And I sat there looking at her and I'm like, oh my gosh, we lived the same story. Like we had all these very familiar feelings. And, it's just awesome to see somebody intentionally talking about it.
Mm.
Because so often, especially on a farm, I guess I haven't lived off of a farm, so I don't know if it happens in town. But on the farm, like you feel isolated from things and it kind of does something to your psyche. And it was just a surprise to really be able to talk about it. And even when I first started sharing my story, it was like, oh my gosh, like farm wives came up to me and were like, we never talk about this. But yes, this is exactly how I was feeling. So I just think
Yeah.
it's so cool how you help others feel seen in that season of that life. So please tell me, why don't you start out telling me about your story and how you were feeling when the kids were younger and
Yeah.
on the farm. And I guess it says in your bio that you're a farm wife, but there's so much more than farm wife.
Yes. Yes. Well, I met my farmer right out of college. I did not grow up on a farm. Generations previous to me came from farms in Wisconsin and Iowa, but they were told they had to go to the big city to get a job. And so that's really all I knew. And I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, met my farmer husband, and was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to move from everything I've ever known, like city suburban life, to rural Illinois. And so we were married. I moved from cute little downtown apartment, downtown Chicago to rural Illinois, right after we were married. And so marrying into farm life taught me a lot. It was a whole different lifestyle, different location, just so different from what I had ever known. But during my visits when we dated and were engaged, I just loved being out in nature and the peace and quiet. I loved the isolation compared to busy city life. And so, getting married to a farmer meant I had to learn all about a farming lifestyle, about the operation. I was a high school teacher at the time, so I wasn't going to be working full time on the farm. But when you marry into a family business of some sort, especially farming, you're called on to do different roles and have different responsibilities, especially during really busy times of year. So I know one of the things that he asked me to do because he thought I think it was fun was baling hay on a really hot July day. And I absolutely hated it. I absolutely hated it. But it's things like that, right? Like he would call and he'd say, "Hey, we need a couple extra hands. Can you come help bale hay?" So I'd throw on my hay baling clothes and go bale hay, doing parts runs, driving the guys around from field to field, helping my mother in law and sister in law with field meals, different things like that. So I didn't have a full time role on the farm who are very supported, especially during busy seasons. So I was a high school teacher. We had kids, had the crazy feeling that I needed to get my PhD in education. So I did that. At a certain point, we did move off the farm, and that was for various reasons, but mostly to get me closer to where I was working and because I was really missing like a neighborhood feel for my children. And being on the farm felt very isolating. It just was, especially where we were located. And so we moved off the farm, but I continued, working my way up the ladder, building my career, and still trying to manage all the roles that come with navigating really busy spring and harvest season, even later nights and long weekends in the summertime. People say that I think it's a misconception that farmers really slow down when it's not spring or fall, but they're still really busy and their schedules are still really full. And so trying to manage a household plus extra responsibilities on top of having a career, it was a lot. And even just my husband and I are very committed to pouring in our community through 4-H, through young leaders like Farm Bureau, different organizations, youth coaching. And so navigating all those roles, it's like we forgot to take care of ourselves all those years, but yet we were excelling in a lot of things. And we both looked at our life and realized like we had forgotten to take care of ourselves and our health and our marriage. And we knew it was time to do that. And so we both took steps together and separately to get our health back on track, to get our marriage back on track, to better communicate and to make it work and to put systems in place to make it work. And that had incredible effects, not only on our marriage and our family and our own health, but also in the farming operation, in my own career, and how we were showing up in these different spaces. And so that's really over the span of 20 years, where life has taken us. But it took us realizing that we were living a way that we weren't wanting to be living. And we felt disconnected to
It
make
loo-
those changes.
yes, and it looks perfect. It looks like you're doing all the things, but on the back end, what everybody doesn't see is the exhaustion and the burnout and the disconnectedness from who you really are and from who you are as a couple and even your kids. Like your kids will
Yeah.
even that disconnect because you're not fully present.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that just it's shared among professionals in many fields. So outside of agriculture too, but I think the difference in agriculture is because people living in rural areas do not have access to certain communities or certain conversations just because of location, right? So before COVID, this wasn't a thing. Like virtual calls like
Right.
this weren't a thing. And so you had to physically get yourself to your local farm bureau or young leader group, which could be 30 minutes to an hour plus away, especially in rural America. People might be driving up to 2 hours to, the nearest city or town where those groups are held. And so I feel like in agriculture, it hits a little different because it's already very isolating because of where you live. And yes, that could be really fulfilling and peaceful and beautiful. It could also result in a feeling of aloneness in your struggles.
Right. Because at the end of the day, we all need community. It doesn't matter who you are. We all need community. We all need friends, and we all need someone to have our back
Mhm.
and sympathize and have an ear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I remember when we moved off the farm into a neighborhood, I remember just going on walks with the kids. Well, one, I couldn't walk where we lived before because of we lived where the farm's at, just in a beautiful area along the Spoon River that's very hilly and a gravel road, and you can't push a stroller, you can't ride a bike. And so it was great walking with the dog before we had kids, but then after that, I couldn't even walk outside with the kids.
Sure.
And so when we moved to the neighborhood, I remember just being able to walk down the street and see other moms outside playing with their kids and just like stopping and having a conversation, mom to mom, where I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that previously. And that was something that I was always used to growing up, is having other kids nearby to just go and have community immediately with. And so it's something that I had missed when we lived where we lived before. And so that was definitely something that helped me, especially in those early years of motherhood, because those first years I felt very alone in my struggles,
Mhm.
especially with the long drives and not having families close by to play with.
Yeah, that is really challenging. And our family has kind of struggled with that as well. We stayed on the farm, but the kids, they still kind of struggle with a little bit of isolationism because we're humans, out of sight, out of mind. Like if so and so isn't at school, they're not going to get invited to do whatever. When
Mhm.
you're on the farm, it just happens that way. But yeah, I guess, and our kids are in all of those programs, 4-H, junior leaders, like all that stuff. And that's where they gain that community feeling.
Mhm. Mhm.
So good. And I think it's really fascinating. I don't think I would have ever thought to move into town to solve some of our problems. Like,
Mm.
never would have thought of it.
It was a very hard conversation, and it was in a really hard time of life. With we had 2 little kids back to back, 2 babies back to back within 14 months of each other, and I was still working, and he was putting in lots of long hours, and it was that conversation of what's gonna make it easier for me, and that was kind of the happy medium, especially with it'd be a shorter drive for me. He would then commute, right? Like, he always said he traded his walk across the gravel road for like a 25-minute commute. But I still had a commute to work, but it wasn't as long as it was before. And so it allowed us a chance to find better balance and to have that separation between work and life, which was really hard for him when he lived across the
On
road from and on the farm, right? Like, it was our house and my in-laws across the gravel road, and the farmstead was all right there. And so when you see your dad working at 4 in the morning, you want to go out and work with your dad at 4 in the morning, right? Or late at night, even if there's a baby home. So we had to physically take steps to change our environment. And that was something that we tried, and it worked for some time. And then we had the discussion as his parents are getting older and things were changing at the farm to try to get us a little closer. We're not on the farm, but we're just one town away. And so he now only has a 10-15 minute drive to work. And it's a lot easier for me to take the kids out there, especially now with my son who's loves driving equipment during the busy seasons and can help now that he's a teenager and can't drive yet. It's very easy for me to drive him out there, drop him, and then go pick him up. Easier to drop off field meals, easier to hang out versus before it was a lot harder because it was a further drive, but we only had so many options.
exactly. That's awesome. I love how you did that. So all of that learning over the last 20 years really took you to where you are today. Like, I'd really like to talk about where you are today because I think it's so powerful what you're doing and encouraging, and the way you make people feel seen and encourage the people around you. You started a coaching program and have different master classes and that sort of thing. Tell me about that. Tell me why you decided to stop teaching and really pour into adults in a different way. Like, you poured into
Yeah.
kids and teachers previously. Like, how did you decide that that's who I want to pour into?
Yeah,
It's
it was a
right?
slow discovery. I'm still am a teacher at heart. I loved teaching high schoolers and then teaching teachers how to teach. And when I found myself in what I thought was my dream job post COVID, I realized that what I had worked so hard for to be in my dream job actually was really unsustainable for my life as a mom and a farm wife as well. The long hours, the workload, the commute, all of it. I wasn't physically around because of the work hours, the amount of time that I had to commit left me little time and energy to commit to my family. And I started to see signs that I needed to be committing more time and energy to my family. And so I started to just get this feeling of misalignment. Like I was in my dream job, but I was highly stressed. I was exhausted. I was worn out. I was not in great physical, mental, emotional state. And that's when I looked in the mirror. I wasn't 40 yet. I was turning 38. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I have one more year until I turn 40. And I am actually dreading the next decade of my life. Like, this is all I've worked for. I don't feel like myself. This is not what I thought it was going to be. My kids need me. My husband needs me. And even though it looked like I was successful, I felt like it just didn't feel right. And that's all I can explain, that it just didn't feel right. And I did a lot of talking with my husband and colleagues and friends and mentors and decided that I needed to take a step back. And so I also at the same time was seeing teachers struggling in school. So part of my job as a professor was teaching future teachers, but then going into schools and supporting them. And so the conversations I was having with teachers very much reflected how I was feeling. They were exhausted. They were burned out. They didn't know how much longer they could teach. And I just thought, wow, I've got to figure this out for myself first. And then I have to figure out how to better support teachers, right? We need to support local schools. And so that's where my brain went initially was let me pull back. Let me figure out how to support teachers locally. I can do professional development in schools. I can work on myself, be home more for the kids. What that led to was really me diving into my own like wellness journey and then people recognizing that I was different, that I had figured it out and asking me to then speak to schools, to organizations and companies about work-life balance, health and wellness strategies from a place of life experience and research. I'm a researcher, right? I have my PhD. I know how to do all this. I usually dig in, figure it all out, and then figure out how does this actually work in real life?
Right.
And so that just happened organically through those conversations. And I was realizing, wow, professionals are struggling, right? It's not just teachers, it's professionals post-COVID. There aren't boundaries. People that are working from home still have a hard time shutting down work, or maybe they're working hybrid, or maybe they've taken on a lot of poor habits and a lack of boundaries, or they're just exhausted and they haven't gotten that back post COVID. So even though we're years out, we still see those effects of it. And so I realized that there was a need for practical, actionable health and wellness strategies for the everyday professional that's trying to balance work, life, leadership, commitments within agriculture, within education, within other organizations and other industries. And so I was being asked to speak. And so I started just kind of develop some different frameworks and strategies. And then I had people reach out saying, hey, would you be a life coach for me? And I was like, I don't do that. But then I had enough people reach out where I was like, well, maybe there's something to that. If people are asking for one-on-one help and support, my teacher brain put together a curriculum for coaching. And a mentor said, just test it out, see if it works, see if you even like it. And so I found 10 friends that had reached out over the years. They all said, yes, absolutely, we'll try it. And at the end, all of them said that it was life changing and they had taken strategies to improve themselves physically, emotionally, intellectually, to show up more present, to be more confident at work, to be a better, authentic leader in a workplace. And it just was really powerful that they encouraged me to then release it to the public. And it was actually at that farm conference where I was sitting there
Mm.
because it was January and I knew I wanted to release my coaching program in the spring, but I wasn't sure who was it going to be for? Was it just women in general? Who was it going to be for? And I sat there and we had that morning breakfast and it hit me that women in ag still don't have opportunities for community as much as they need to. And I thought, man, 20 years ago, I needed a community and I can offer that. And I can offer a place for women to feel seen, to work on themselves. And so that was where I got the idea to have my first public group coaching group be for women in agriculture. And I put the marketing together, released it, and I had 10 women, some that were part of a team, some women that I knew, some women that I never heard of that signed up. And it was a really powerful 3-month cohort where during the spring season, which is a busy season, where we came together and we had those conversations with an overall sense of like, we get it. Whether you come from a farming background, whether you work for a company that's in the agriculture industry, whether your husband's farming, whether you're helping or not, we at least have a sense of what it's like. And that shared experience was incredibly invigorating and powerful for everybody to then set steps and motions for how they wanted to show up better for themselves, for their family, for their health, for their community, for their career. And so that's what it's like led to. Continuing to speak and hold workshops and my own master classes and group coaching. I'll release my next group coaching program this spring for women in ag again, just because I feel like it was such a powerful time of year. So it's just been a really beautiful journey of just seeing what my life and research has been able to do for myself, but also other people and to teach along the way.
So is your group coaching, has it continued past the 3 months?
Yes, some of those women continue to work with me one-on-one.
Okay.
Some have asked me to speak to their organization. So that's the coolest thing is once women are in my world, right? Then they're like, I need you to come and speak to my women's group, or I want you to come speak to my organization. Or one in particular is part of a women in agribusiness group in the state of Illinois, and they host a conference for high school girls in agriculture. And we had a conversation and she's like, you would be such a great role model for high school girls. Like your whole life, you've been in front of high schoolers. So you already know how to speak to them and speak their language. Come and tell your story. And so I'll be speaking at two of their conferences this spring that attracts hundreds of high school girls across the state. I'm their keynote. And then I'm also speaking to their agribusiness group during their annual meeting to help those professional women with some wellness strategies. It's been incredible how one door opens the next door that opens the next door. And so whether I keep in touch with them through coaching or through other opportunities, it's been really beautiful.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's still I go to a lot of ag related conferences. They're very male dominated just because it's a male dominated field. And I'm so happy that there are conferences and groups and podcasts for women in ag because it gives them a space and makes them feel not alone. It allows them to hear other people's stories. It's so what I needed. And so you always hear that you're best able to serve the person you were before, like the versions previous. And so it just has felt so right to support women in ag in various ways. While I'm not a full-time operator, I still get what it's like and I see the everyday workings.
Yes. And there's such an invisible load, even if you are not the active operator. And that is one thing that women in ag, why they connect on this different level, because there's all these unseen things. There's these
Mhm.
seasons of being a single parent. There's these seasons of doing everything all at once. There's so many small day-to-day things that hold an invisible, it's not necessarily a burden, but sometimes it does feel heavy.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the job. And not everybody understands
Mhm.
it. Only women in agriculture.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're so right in that it's the invisible load, like the labor, right? But it's the emotional labor, the
Yeah.
mental labor, the when your husband is gone, you are in charge of everybody's schedules all day long, plus keeping everybody alive and the household running and your own schedule. And then when your spouse gets home, like the emotional support, right? That happens. Like stress very much is determined by the season or the weather, things that you can't control. And so while you're trying to maintain some control and systems, lots of things can throw those things off, right? And so it's a lot. And it's not something that I grew up with and something that I've had to learn and to navigate and to fail. And I call it an imperfect, beautiful dance because it is imperfect, but it is beautiful, but it is hard. And you just got to keep dancing and you just got to keep going. But at a certain point, I just got to keep working harder or it's just going to get better. Or I just got to pull up my straps and keep going. Like sometimes that can be really toxic. And that's what I found is that it led to a place where I just kept pushing and pushing, that it led me down a path that I wasn't proud of and that I developed some really poor habits to deal with the stress, to numb the stress. And it was the same with my husband too. And that affected our marriage and how we were showing up and our own health.
Right. Well, and you're waiting for that season that things are going to slow down.
And it
And
never does.
so, like, you're believing a lie, essentially,
Yeah.
And how are you going to step out of that? And
Yeah.
really take a look and be self-aware of what your current reality is and what are you going to do to change it.
Absolutely. To learn the strategies and to put them in place one day at a time, whether it's communication with your spouse, whether it's pouring into yourself and not feeling guilty about it, whether it's putting systems in place with family schedules or your household or different things to keep the family and the house running, those things are absolutely necessary. Asking for help.
That was one of the hardest things that I had to overcome was asking for help.
Actually, somebody asked me that a while ago. What's one thing you wish you would have done when the kids were younger, when you were in the midst of all of that? Because it's different. Having little kids is definitely different than the elementary, middle school years, which is different than where I'm at right now, which is like middle school, high school years. It's just different seasons. It's still very full, very busy, very stressful. It's just different. But I wish I would have asked for more help. I wish it would have been okay to just have somebody come and watch the kids so I could have some moments of like peace and quiet and like deep breaths and a reset, right? And not to feel guilty to just like go run errands and like go to town, which a 30-minute drive away is you go to town and it's a 4-hour ordeal, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'd always take the kids with me. And sometimes there were many times where I'd load the kids in the grocery cart and they'd both be having tantrums. And I'm like, I won't be able to physically get groceries because they're having tantrums, but I drove here. I'm going to have to just load them back in the car and go all the way back home. And I hear that often. But when you live so far already, it's not like it's a 5-10 minute
Oh yeah.
drive, right?
You
It
have
is
to
an
push
entire
through it.
day. Kids are in diapers, or if they're potty training, or if you're nursing, it's like, where are you going to do all those things? And there's so many logistics behind it that you don't get it unless you get it,
Right. Right.
you know?
Exactly. We were lucky. Our closest larger town had a drop-in daycare. So that's what I would do. I would drop them at drop-in daycare. They hated it, but I'm just like, guys, I can't shop with you. My brain shorts out and I can't focus with all that stuff going on in the cart anyways. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to do it. Yeah.
But asking for help is always what I wish I would have done more of.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it's easier to do so. But I found a community of other moms and parents that are willing to just help and carpool and do what's needed to make sure that everything runs on time because we realize we need each other in this very busy season.
Yes, exactly. I love that for a tip and advice for someone who is new coming into the farm life and that sort of thing. And that's something I try to cultivate here is what would have served you when you first started out? What kinds of things did you want to hear about? Because when I walked into this too, like I was a fifth generation farmer, but my grandfather had passed away in the
Mhm.
farming and I married a farmer. So it was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. And I felt so naive coming into everything thinking, oh, this is great. Everybody is on the same page. Everybody's working towards the same goal and, their family. So they're going to help out. And that's not really what actually happens. And there's all the logistical things of different areas of the business, different areas of your family life, different areas of your marriage, different areas of things that all you're trying to do is make everybody happy. You know,
Yeah,
it doesn't work out that way. And it takes a while to learn that you have to make yourself happy first
absolutely.
and then it spills out.
Yeah, absolutely. When you give and give to everybody except yourself, even in the smallest of ways, that's what I help people understand. Even if it's 5 minutes of quiet, drinking more water, going on a walk, doing a mental reset, praying, reflecting, sending a text to a friend that you want to reconnect with or with a parent or whoever it is, having that conversation that fills your soul. All of those things matter over time, even though in the moment they might not feel significant. Over time, they will be significant to you in filling your cup. One little pour after another. If we think about pouring into our own spirit, soul, body, and mind, those things really matter. But in the moments of extreme stress and overwhelm, we feel like we don't even have time for those things. So we forget to do any of it.
Right.
Because we say,
Right.
oh, that 5-minute walk is not going to help. I don't have time for that. But those small, healthy habits are so essential. but we don't think they're essential until we actually practice it and realize, oh, this is making a difference.
Right. Right. And you can get all of those smaller things done more efficiently when you are in a better place. Otherwise,
Yes.
like it just piles up and piles up, and then you're in overwhelm, right?
Hmm.
And you don't know where to start.
Yeah, I suggest to people to ask, especially in states of overwhelm or where they don't know where to start, is ask yourself in the third person, what does Kristen need today? Asking yourself in the third person shows that you zoom out and it gives you perspective that's not your own personal perspective. So you answer more like a best friend or someone with care versus
Mm.
with criticism or with stress. And so when you say, what does Kristen need today? See what comes up and then do that thing. So if it says you just need to go out and get some fresh air, go out and get some fresh air. If you need 5 or 10 minutes to take a little break, take that little break. If you need to sit with your warm cup of coffee, go do that. If you need to reconnect with somebody, go do that. Whatever it is, go do that thing because that's what's going to feel good and like lean into what feels good, especially in those moments of
Yeah.
overwhelm and stress.
I love that. That's such great advice. So, do you want to tell us how people can work with you this year with your new coaching program coming up? It's group coaching, right?
Absolutely. I do group coaching in one-on-one. I have a small roster of one-on-one clients as well, if that's a better fit. But you can go to my website. It's drkristenstrom.com. And under work with me, there are some options.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can post it in the show notes. But there's options to work with me. It's the Empowered Ascent coaching program. I'm launching in April, my group for women in ag. It was fabulous last year. And I know the women that did that group, they were anywhere from women that worked for ag companies, for the state ag education program. They were farmers themselves or married to farmers of some sort or ranchers. They own their own ag related business, whatever it might be. Just knowing that we were all in it together and we understood, again, was really incredible. And just that feeling of feeling seen, like you mentioned, just helps you realize you're not alone and that you can do this and that there's a supportive community of women that get it and want to work on themselves too together. So that's one way you can work with me. I also speak to farm bureaus, organizations, companies locally around the United States, done a global keynote. So I'm open to having a conversation of how I can support through health and wellness strategies, work life balance, finding more purpose, more joy, and just stepping confidently into leadership roles and how to do it all, right? Like how to really have it all and feel fulfilled by it. Because I don't think it's a myth. I think you can have it all, but you have to be very intentional about where you put your energy and your time. And you have to be taking care of yourself first and foremost so that you can be able to pour into all the things that you want to do and that you feel committed to.
I love that. And I feel like as mothers and women, especially, that's what we're all going for. I would say most of us, that's what we want. We want to have it all. But how do we get it?
Yeah.
And sometimes we just need a coach. We need somebody outside of ourselves to really help us gain perspective on where we actually are because we are our own worst critic. And we can tell ourselves these things just aren't true, like, oh, your house isn't clean enough. You didn't do this enough. And I feel like all women struggle with that at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And having someone to be emotionally detached from us to really give us perspective on who we are, like really helps you pull back and be like, oh, I am cooler than I think I am. I am doing more than I think I am doing.
Like these
Where
little
from?
things that I am doing is important, right?
Yes, yes. And there's little strategies, which you are great at, is strategy. I am not great at strategy, and I'm okay with that. And maybe in 2026, that will be what I do decide to work on is strategy and that sort of thing. But the intentional balance in your
Mhm.
life, it's all a balance and it's never going to be perfectly balanced all the time. And it's like you said, it's the dance in between the balance. And how does that make you happy personally?
Yep. And to know that you don't have to do it alone is so powerful. I think when you can learn from other women, and I'm so glad that you have this podcast to allow people to tell their stories and to remind people that you're not just anything. You can be anything that you want, but you have to take care of yourself in the process so that you can give your gifts fully to the world, whether it's your kids, your spouse, your farm, your ranch, your community, other groups that you're a part of. Because that's what we're here for, is to give our best gifts and skills and talents to the world. But when we're completely depleted or we feel so alone in the process, we can't fully show up in those spaces. And so I love being able to help women find their purpose, find more peace, more balance, more joy, better health overall. And many of them are just feeling more connected to their spouse, more connected to their kids, more present as a mom, as a professional. And they realize that they actually are really killing it in their life, right? And they get to a place where they're like, you know what? Now I feel like I am living my purpose and I'm doing as best as I can versus always feeling like they're not doing enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And I have found too, like, when you really can connect on what your purpose is, when you really choose to live more passionately in your life, you can have multiple purposes. You can have multiple passions. You can enjoy many things because we're human. We're not just one thing. We don't just like only one thing. And when you can kind of pinpoint where you are and what it is that you love, like that's where all those gifts come out of. That's where the light in your eyes comes back. And,
Yeah,
people around you can feel that change in you.
absolutely. And that's what I want for all people in this world.
I know. I love it. Yeah. And that was like for me doing the TEDx talk, I was not ready. I have never spoken before in my life publicly, but sometimes is that one person that sees the light in you
Hmm.
and gives you that minute to remember it,
Yep.
remember where you were. And doing that just reminded me of who I really am, you know?
Hmm.
Also, another good reason to work with a coach is because sometimes you just get so buried in everything that's going on and everybody else's stuff.
Hmm.
But working with a coach, like if you're self aware enough, you can be like, oh, you knew that it was a misalignment. You knew that something had to change, but it's nice to have other farm women to connect to,
Hmm.
help you see it and
Absolutely.
light that up in you again.
Absolutely.
I hope that you connect with Kristen because she is just wonderful and very strategic and lays everything out for you very nicely. I've looked over some of your classes and that sort of thing. And you definitely have a teacher mind. And I love it. I hope that people connect with you and see what keep going because it's wonderful what you're doing. I love your passion and I love how you show up for your life. I love following you online because you have so many good tips and tricks throughout the day. That's why social media is so popular, right? We want to see people showing up in the world as who they are.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to connecting to your listeners. And I just appreciate you creating a space for people to realize they're never just one thing and that we have to give ourselves, sometimes it takes giving ourselves permission to realize that we can be many things to many different people, but we first have to show up for ourselves first.
Yes. What a great takeaway. Well, thank you so much, Kristen. It was so great to have this wonderful conversation with you. And I can't wait to see all that you continue to create in your life and in your farm and the way you show up in this world.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you for listening to today's episode. And remember, you are never just an anything.